Welcome back, everyone. Today I'm talking about a brand new company with a brand new DAC called the Divinity, but there's something eerily familiar about this DAC. Let's talk about the Garlubidor Divinity DAC. So before we get going, let's talk about DACs a little bit up front. DACs, they are a digital to analog converter. Basically, it takes the digital signal from your streamer, if you're streaming music, say, for example, or serving music, and it converts that digital signal, those zeros and ones, to an analog signal. Now, a lot of DACs, all DACs do the same thing. They complete the same job, but for some reason, they all sound a little bit different. And there are a few DACs I've heard that sound vastly different from each other. I've heard DACs ranging from $50 all the way up to over $100,000 with the Nagra HD DAC X that I lived with for a while in the beginning of this year. So I've listened to probably in my lifetime well over 100 DACs. Today, I want to talk about a DAC that comes in at around $1,850 US, but it definitely sounds, looks, feels, and performs like a DAC that's more in the $3,000 to $5,000 range. This is really a beautiful DAC. Now, the company Garlubidor, when I received this DAC, they asked me if I wanted to review it. I checked it out on their website. And I thought to myself, well, this looks really nice, but there was a sense of familiarity with it. It was familiar to me. So when the DAC showed up, I took it out of the box and I didn't get anything in there that said Garlubidor, but I got this instead. This was in the box, a card from Denafrips. So I Googled it as well, and Garlubidor is owned by the same company that owns Denafrips. So it's all working under the same parent company. And there are a lot of familiar things with the Garlubidor Divinity as DACs I've seen from Denafrips. Now, I love Denafrips DACs. I reviewed the Pontus 2, the Pontus 15th. I reviewed their Terminator DACs, and they were all really amazing for what they cost. The Terminators sound beautiful, but they do cost a lot of money. But the one that really stuck with me in the Denafrips line is the Pontus. I loved every version of the Pontus I had in here, and the Pontus 15th was no exception. It brought forth a little more of a livelier sound, a little more present details into the room, and I liked that direction they were going. But what's wrong with the Denafrips DACs? Nothing really, unless you want the features such as a preamp function with a volume control. Maybe you want a display screen that's easy to see from across the room. Maybe you want a remote control. Well, Garlubidor with the Divinity has created a Pontus-like DAC, but it includes all of these new features. So you can run it into an amp without a preamp because it acts as a preamp. You can run it into an integrated amp and just set the fixed volume. You have a nice display with big orange coloring so you can easily see your volume from across the room and the signal that's going in. And you have a convenient, small, but metal solid remote control. Now, when I took this DAC out of the box, the Divinity, it was very hefty. And again, it reminded me of a Denafrips Pontus. Any of you who've had the Pontus know that it's also a hefty, really well-made and feeling DAC. So this one gave me the same kind of feeling. On the back, it had the same kind of design as a Denafrips. And let's go over the inputs and outputs before we get to what this thing sounds like. So on the front, you have your power button, which is an easy on and off. You have an input button, which selects the various inputs that you will see on the back here in a minute. You have a menu button, and then you finally have your big volume dial. So that's pretty cool. It looks really nice. I feel that it looks a lot nicer than the Denafrips style, because it has the screen and the volume dial. Very nice looking and very useful at the same time. So if we flip things around to the back, you're going to see that this has an RCA set of outputs as well as a balanced XLR set of outputs. It also has all the inputs that you would want, or that most people would want. It has an AES input, it has USB input, it has an optical input, has a coax input, and it has the I2S inputs as well. So it's all ready to go with whatever input you want to use. But features, inputs, build quality, feel is all superb. And usually I don't see this kind of quality in a DAC that's $1,850. So I first plugged it into the reference setup, which is Icon 12 speakers, as you see behind me, the Enlium Amp 54R, which was it's an integrated amp, but it doesn't have a streamer or DAC built in. So I used the Eversolo T8 as my streaming transport, which I still use in my reference system, going into the Divinity DAC, and finally that going into the inputs of the Enlium 54R. So before that, fresh in my mind was the Fez DAC, and that's what I had been listening to before this Divinity came. So I put the Divinity in, I hooked everything up, and I sat back and I started listening to some music. By this time it was around 8 o'clock in the evening, it was dark outside, so I settled in with some mood lighting in here, and I wanted to start to enjoy the sounds. Now, I was expecting this to sound quite a bit like the Pontus 15th, and in many ways it does, but it sounds a little bit different. So the Pontus 15th from Denafrips is over $2,000, and it's a superb DAC in that price range. The Divinity, in my opinion, sounds a little bit nicer than the Pontus 15th, and it has all these extra features. So going into the Enlium, what I was hearing was just an amazing soundstage. Now, the Enlium has this ability to unearth all these hidden details within a recording, and they just come out and they're more prevalent. But with the Divinity DAC, it was helping the Enlium along here. So the soundstage was super wide, but what impressed me most, I was experiencing one of the deepest sound stages with nice imaging in those layers of depth, right? Imagine deep, 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 and there's layers within that depth of instruments and sounds coming out. It was doing a very commendable job. It was very holographic. The details, this is not a warm, gooey DAC, but yet it's not a super fast or bright DAC. It's kind of more in the neutral territory. So you're going to get all the details coming out. The mid-range of, say, the Enlium is so clean and clear, but it has this organic flow. I can't even explain it. The Enlium Amp 54R runs in voltage or current mode, and running it in voltage mode, I've never heard an amp quite like it. And kind of like that Enlium 23R that I said was lit from within. You can kind of dive into the soundstage and hear every little particle. So the Enlium does this, but the cool thing was the Divinity wasn't taking the performance of the Enlium down from the more expensive Fez DAC. It was just presenting a different kind of soundstage with more of an organic imaging and a little bit thicker of a sound, but I don't want to say it was thick, it just wasn't super airy. But what impressed me the most was the soundstage performance here. Now the imaging was pretty natural here with the Divinity DAC. Instruments were placed in their corrective places within that soundstage, and I was just blown away by what I was hearing, because the cost of this DAC is not $5,000, $10,000, $100,000 like that Nagra HD DAC that I had at the beginning of the year. I wrote a written review for the Divinity, and I said in the first paragraph that I don't think anyone needs to spend more than this on a DAC. Now, I've heard DACs that are more affordable than this, but none of them reach the level of the Divinity. There are differences in DACs. I've heard those crazy exotic DACs, and yes, it can get better from the Divinity, but you're going to have to shell out some money for those differences and changes, and those changes bring more refinement, a little more fluidity, a little more color maybe. Now, the Divinity Like I said, it's more leaning neutral, right? It's not lean or bright. It's not warm or thick. So it's going to present what's on the recording, and it really depends on what amp you hook it up to. Because what I found with the Divinity is it's letting me hear the characteristics of each amp that I'm running in the system, because the DAC is not injecting its own big flavor of sound, right? It's not like a Chord Dave that's going to assault your senses with details. It does this more in a natural way, but it really is a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful DAC. So as I usually do, I queue up my Tidal playlist. I use Tidal Connect with the Eversolo T8. And I queued up Horses at Night from Strand of Oaks. Now I like this track because it has some ambient information in there. And it's a big song with swells and beautiful music and a beautiful message. And the recording quality of this entire album I find to be to my liking. But Horses at Night has quiet moments, big moments, and with the Divinity DAC in the system, the sound was as beautiful as I've ever heard the song. And I'm even talking about with mega expensive DACs. It had a way of layering the music again in that deep sound stage with the Enlium, and it was just a beautiful, goosebump-inducing performance. Now somebody's going to say, well, you're running it with the Enlium, which is a $25,000 amplifier. I agree. I wanted to hear the Divinity with something more price appropriate. So I pulled out my Gallione A75 power amp and the P75 preamp. I also have the Navy preamp here, which is Thomas's passion project preamp, no expense spared, amazing parts quality, etc., etc. So first I took the Divinity as a preamp in preamp mode, plugged it right into the Gallione, and I used the Divinity's remote for the volume. And it worked fantastic. The sound still had that neutral kind of vibe, but the A75 was bringing bass, punch, impact. That's a powerful sounding amp, even though it's only 75 watts per channel. Somehow Thomas has made this amp, his giant killer amp, sound like a much bigger wattage amp. But it was sounding really good. The sound stage was not as deep. I lost that layering in the depth. There was a little bit there. The soundstage wasn't as wide as with the Enlium, but keep in mind, the Gallione is a $1,500 amp, and I had just taken out a $25,000 integrated amp. So then I switched it up. I put the P75 preamp with the Gallione amp, and I set the output of the Divinity to the P75. Now, the sound was a little bit nicer and more to my liking because I really like the P75 preamp. It uses tubes. It injects a little bit of body and warmth. So I was hearing a little bit more of a warmer presentation, but the Divinity was still bringing what it brought to the table, which was really great detail retrieval, some transparency and openness, but yet there was some body to it. But again, the DAC's not providing a ton of body. The bass of the Divinity is excellent. I wouldn't say it's the best I've heard in a DAC, but it's excellent. Again, I got to remember, $1,800 price point. I don't think you can get any better for you have to spend over $3,000, I think, to best the Divinity. That's what makes it so cool. I then put in the Navy preamp, which is Thomas's high-end preamp, right? It's $3,300, $3,400, and it's meant to sound more neutral, more sparkly, more detailed, like something you would get in a $10,000 preamp. And I gotta say, he succeeded. This preamp, the Navy, is his masterpiece, at least from what I've seen. I love the P75, but the Navy is on another level. It's nicer looking. It uses more premium parts, all the capacitors in there. So when that was playing, I was getting a bigger sound, a little more open, and it was reminding me more of the Enlium. Now, the Enlium is doing something crazy special. I'm going to review that down the road here. It has such a unique presentation, one I've not heard before, and I've been comparing that to the Devilet Astra, which is the same price point, but I'll talk about those later. But the Navy with the A75 and the Divinity with the Eversolo T8 was sounding 85%, 80% of the Enlium. It was more open. It was more detailed. It had a beautiful mid-range. And I was like, wow, you know, I've had so many DACs. I've spent so much money on DACs over the years. This is truly all any normal person would need, not a crazy, obsessed audio guy like me, because I always want to try new things. But this is a really good DAC. So I really like what Garlubidor did with the Divinity. They also have a lower price DAC called the Phantom, and that looks really sharp as well. But the Divinity is super sweet. In my opinion, it's a better Denafrips because it's giving you more for less. I pulled up Fields of Gold Live by Ava Cassidy, one of my favorite songs to listen to. I have it even on vinyl, a special edition vinyl that sounded so good. But queuing it up from Tidal going into the Galleon stack, she was in the room. Again, soundstage wasn't as wide and deep as the exotic Enlium, but man, if I never heard the Enlium, I would say this Galleon and this Divinity are a perfect match, even with the P75. Ava just sounded like she was so in the room, her voice coming out like it does in many times, but the mid-range here is really of the clearer variety, not the puffed up variety. I like that puffed up sound with rock and metal, right? You get that backbone, that bass impact. But with vocals like that, if you have a puffed up sound, it can obscure some of the details, not only in the voice, but with the background instruments. So here Ava was sounding crystal clear. You know, everything was in its place in the sound stage, and it was just a beautiful, intimate performance, as if I was sitting in a club somewhere watching her live. Compared to the Pontus 15th, I thought the Pontus 15th was a step up. They did something really nice with that DAC. But I think this is neck and neck with that Pontus 15th. But what takes the Divinity over the finish line is that it has these new features. The volume control, the display, the remote control, and in my opinion, a nicer look. Comes in black or silver. And if you want to find more info about it, you could check it out at Garlubidor's website. I'll put a link in the video description below. And no, I was not paid. This is not a sponsored video. This is just my honest thoughts. This is a really good DAC, especially if your budget is in the $3,000 and under range. So I hope you liked this look at this brand new DAC and brand new company. And if you do, thumbs up, subscribe. Make sure you turn those notifications on so when I upload a new video, you get that notification on your phone. You can also see me at Instagram at HiFi Huff Official. I post there all the time when new gear comes in. I throw first looks up there. It's quick and easy. And sometimes I'll do some quick sound demos and give my early first impressions. So that's at HiFi Huff Official on Instagram. Other than that, I thank you all for watching. I love you all, and I will see you in the next one.